Hello and welcome to the Jack Hopkins Show podcast. I'm your host, Jack Hopkins. Today I am fortunate, very fortunate indeed, to have with me Chair of the Florida Democratic Party, Nikki Fried. Welcome, Nikki.
Thanks, Jack, for having me on. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Well, as am I. Uh, I will say for you and anybody that's listening, uh, first of all, anybody that's listening probably, unless they just stumbled onto me, knows I'm kind of outspoken at times. I kind of have, I guess, what some people would refer to maybe as a rebellious streak, in that I don't do everything like maybe the the system expects you to do it. And that's one thing I respect and admire so much about you, because you've demonstrated you are not hindered by those lines. You are not afraid to make some waves and to address matters that need to be addressed, even if they are uncomfortable and not particularly helpful to your political career to bring up.
Yep. Yeah, I've always been an independent thinker. That's when I lobbied before I was elected in 2018, and I had my dad is a diehard Republican, my mom's a diehard Democrat. I was a lobbyist. Most of my friends during the time as a lobbyist, I was a Republican. They were Republican, but yet I'm still a Democrat. So I just always kind of just even when I was commissioner of agriculture, my team used to say to me like, they're when we find solutions to things, they used to say it's not left, right, like it's outside the box. We need to find the Nikki Fried solution to this problem.
Right.
And then, just kind of like looking at it from a different perspective and not taking necessarily the Democratic lane of this, but let's figure out a solution that's going to work for everybody. But yeah, I got a
Right.
little bit of rebellion streak. Got myself arrested last year. All
And, and I was like, yeah, because, and here's the thing, you were arrested supporting a rock solid cause, right?
good.
And I think that's what's so important to point out and to contrast. We've seen plenty of outspoken people who aren't afraid to get out of the lines from the Republican Party, right? But what's not always, and in fact, I would argue, is seldom there, it's not in support of a cause that is best for the greater good, right? It's
Yeah.
not for everybody. It tends to be fairly political party specific, right? So I'm looking after you, my Republican, constituents or supporters. This is going to hurt the people in the other party, but that's okay because we don't care about them. All of the issues that I look at that you've gotten behind, they are issues that matter to everybody.
Yeah.
People
And
in both parties benefit.
that's right. And I've always, and it's one of my like greatest pet peeves, especially when it comes to like politics, that it unfortunately attracts some of the worst people on both sides of the aisle, but some of the worst
Sure.
people because they're doing it for their own ego, or they like to wear the lapel pin to be able to get into office spaces and reserve seats at events, and that the handshaking of things, and not really for the actual public service part of it.
Right.
And I get on my Democrats all the time. You've got to come home and do the constituency services. You got to come home and look at ways to help people, regardless of their Democrat, Republican. When I was elected in 2018, I represent all 22 million people, not just that this 8 million, the 4 million people that voted for me, and not just the Democrats. My job was for all 22 million Floridians, and it's really important that when you're fighting for causes and you're fighting for things, it's because it's benefiting everybody. And you're right, access to reproductive health care, it is across the board. It's not only for Democrats. It's for everybody, and that's what I got arrested
Sure.
for. But I'm also, as if anybody has ever followed me and how I started my career, and really in politics, was the advocacy of legalization of cannabis. Again,
Yes,
not a Democratic issue. It is a people person issue,
indeed.
and medical marijuana and access to that. And so, yeah, I try to make sure that I'm not just advocating for things because they have a D next to their name, or that's the issue that only impacts, a small group of people.
Right. And that's important to point out about the medical marijuana. I I was about to say I am a medical marijuana card holder. I was, but now Missouri passed a law where you don't have to have the card anymore. As a veteran, as somebody who had a traumatic brain injury and has dealt with chronic pain for 30 years,
Yeah.
I have found, in my case, particularly gummies, help me sleep
Yep.
and get better rest, and therefore it helps with my pain. Now, I bring this up not only because you've been such a powerful advocate for this, but I live in a county where 8 out of 10 people who voted in this last election and the election prior in 2020 voted for Donald Trump. It's a very red area. Well, guess what? The medical marijuana dispensaries around here are busy, which tells me there are a hell of a lot of Republicans who are using medical marijuana.
100%. Like, first of all, like, this is one of those issues that truly crosses over political parties. Like, you had Donald Trump endorsing the amendment here in the state of Florida for legalization, and Kamala Harris. Like that shows that this is one of those last issues that people across the board can get behind, because everybody's got stories like yours. Everybody's got a family member that including my own. My dad currently is going through cancer, and he's on the medical marijuana registry. My mother went through chemo. She's on it. My grandmother, who just wants her gummies to play mahjong, she just, so it's really, everybody's got these stories. And and when I was Commissioner of Agriculture, when I was crisscrossing the state, I would be talking to, generational farmers and ranchers. And sometimes it'd be 3 generations that were actually taking me around on their tours. And it'd be the oldest generation. And these are definitely not Democrats, but it's the older generation that would come to me and whisper in my ear when they had time with me, be like, so when can I start growing? It's just one of those things that is just, like, it's kind of like, just mind your own damn business. If you want to smoke, if you want to have, gummies, if you want to take whatever instead of alcohol, have at it. It's your life. It's your choice.
You bet.
Just make sure that we're doing it safely.
Yeah. And I had a little help with this, and you'll know in a moment, you'll know who I had help from. And it's probably blush worthy, but I've got to do it. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Nikki. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you.
I think you know who might have.
I would imagine. I know.
Hey, you know what? As far as I know, I am now the only podcaster who has sang happy birthday to you on
Absolutely true. But you get to compete with Kamala Harris last year. So last year, during the holiday season, there's holiday parties at the White House and at the VP's residence, and so happened to be the one at her residence was on my birthday last year. And so when I saw her, she has really great staff, as I do too, and her staff had let them know that it was my birthday, and so
Nice.
she had a present waiting for me, and so she got to sing happy birthday to me. But this is the first podcast that somebody's saying happy birthday, so yes.
Well, how cool though to say Kamala Harris got me a birthday present.
She did.
That's well, and I'm going to kind of hop around here. I kind of like to do. I'm not much of a linear, with the progression through the episode. I think that's probably my ADHD, right? But it also makes for a kind of a more spontaneous episode, I think, right? Yeah. Something I know about you left, I think this was around 2006, maybe, you left the law firm you were with to become a public defender.
Yep.
Now, just a guess, but I'm saying that wasn't to increase your income.
No. It was a fantastic law firm it was the first job that I had after graduating from law school. And it was a great firm, did commercial litigation, good people. But, I kind of was sitting there doing a lot of research and writing and said, this is not how I want to spend the rest of my life. This is not why I went to law school. It was to be pushing, papers for partners and doing all this. And so, yeah, I took more than 50% pay cut
Wow.
to go into the public defender's office. Moved out of Jacksonville back to Alachua County, which is where Gainesville is, University of Florida, is where I had gone to undergrad, law school, and my master's. And yeah, so it was back in a college town, but yeah, it was a pretty substantial pay cut.
Well, I've always kind of thought this, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, or tell me if this is a poor analogy or even comparison. I've always felt like anybody that's in politics that has been a public defender, from the outside looking in, a lot of the people that you're defending as a public defender are probably a better representation of the public at large than people in Washington.
Oh, for sure.
You
And
know?
and I think that that's, I've always been somebody who I come from the Jewish faith, and inside of the Jewish faith, we have a phrase called tikkun olam, to heal the world. And that was really ingrained in me when I was a child. In fact, now I have it tattooed
Oh,
on my
nice.
arm. But it really was ingrained that you had a responsibility to give back and to do good. And so when I had the opportunity to go into the public defender's office, I did. I saw all walks of life, all backgrounds, all socioeconomic backgrounds. I mean, granted, if they're coming to the public defender's office and the PD is representing them, they obviously don't have the financial means to hire their own private attorneys. But it was all walks of life. And sometimes there were kids that parents weren't willing to spend, money for their attorneys. But it
Sure.
really was really eye-opening too, of how people get into the system and they stay in the system, because once you have a criminal record, once you have been exposed to a certain lifestyle, it's hard to break it. And that's really ultimately, I always said that when I got frustrated enough that I had to leave, because I needed every one of my clients to have every ounce of my energy, from the first client that I ever had to my last. And what I found along the way is, that this new kind of mission for me, that I had to find a way to fix things before people got into the system. Making sure that, and a lot of them are minority communities, how do we go into communities and build them up, and to make sure that there's small businesses, and there's roads, and there's quality of life, and they're not going into food banks, but actual food stores, and self-esteem aspects. And that's also what got me into the cannabis world, too, is I saw the disparity between, when one of my clients was arrested for some other charge, but it started off with the odor of cannabis was detected, and that was the probable cause for whatever came next. And I
Sure.
just saw, like, all right, I went to UF, undergrad, master's, like I just said, law school. I know what my friends were doing in
Right.
college, and
Sure.
myself, and
Right.
and that we weren't targeted, and so saw that the racial divide, and saw now that it was my client's word versus the law enforcement officer's word. And sometimes you had bad cops, that would be into these communities that were using cannabis as a way to find reasons to arrest that person for whatever the other issue is. And I just knew that's not right, and that has to be fixed. And that's always when I come into these spaces talking about cannabis or criminal justice reform or economic opportunities for minority communities. It really is my lived experiences, in the public defender's office.
Yeah. I, I haven't ever looked at the statistics on this, but I'm going to say there were probably a lot more arrests for crack than there were cocaine.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Cocaine was kind of an elitist, not an elitist, but you know what I mean, the disparity between the people who were using crack and were using cocaine. In fact, that was, it was a show of status
Yeah.
at one time to, oh, and you want to do a line of coke? Uh, you know, nobody ever showed their status by doing crack. You
Yeah.
know, it was, in many cases, as you mentioned, they were doing crack to cope.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that is the look. You know, there are a lot of people who get off work and go home and will drink a highball or something to kind of wind down and relax. I know my grandfather, eh, every day, every day, and he would only have one,
Hmm.
but he would come home. And in fact, this is crazy. His doctor because he had high blood pressure. Now, at the time, we know things are a little different now, but at the time, his doctor suggested that he do that, that he
Hmm.
come home after, because he had a pretty stressful job, come home, drink one highball, just kind of wind up. And so that's what he did. My point is, and it will take a while to get there, it's no different for somebody to come home and eat a gummy
Oh,
or, you
for
know,
sure. For sure. And that's exactly it. I mean, like I'm not a big drinker. But when I do drink, I'm a bourbon girl, bourbon whiskey
yeah,
girl. It's like I like
yeah,
my scotch and I like my bourbons. But it's the same thing. I don't, we all, life is stressful. Let's take that. Life right
right.
now is stressful, whether you're in politics or you're just trying to make ends meet, in society. Life is stressful. And, yes, you should always find healthy avenues to relieve that stress, whether it's at the gym or going to boxing or going out with girlfriends or whatever it is. But if you find that in order for you to be able to wake up the next day and take back on the world and go to your work, if it means coming home and rolling a joint, who the hell cares?
Right.
Like literally, who cares? I too, I have not been able to sleep for a majority of my life. I've just always have had some sleep conditions, and my brain doesn't turn off at night after
Right.
just keep going,
I
and
get that.
and so the only thing that allows me to fall asleep at night and stay asleep and wake up as a functional human being is I take edibles at night. I'm a
Right.
I'm a chocolate girl, so I do gummies,
Uh-huh.
but I'm a chocolate girl, and I'm a connoisseur of the chocolates too. So I know which dispensaries, and then put now some of the dispensaries are putting RSO in their stuff, and are upping it. Every once in a while, I'll do my own, chocolates or cookies and do my
You
own stuff.
bet.
And definitely in the next like 15, 20 years, whenever I retire, y'all are welcome to my Scandal bar down in Key West that I will be opening. That will be a combination of a dispensary and smoke
Oh,
lounge.
nice. Nice. Nice.
So that's the last chapter, and you're involved in politics enough. You have enough friends that have been in scandals, and so the entire bar will be surrounded by like news clippings of all the Florida politicians, and there will be lots more. But there has been, and will be all over the papers
I,
on the
l-
walls.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, I'll definitely come to your store. I want to ask you, since we're talking about marijuana, a plant, when you were with Department of Agriculture, it's funny because living here in the Midwest, I think corn, beans, you know, it, of course, citrus fruits come to mind when I think about Florida. But I got to thinking, I thought, other than citrus fruits, I'm not sure I know anything else that's grown in Florida. So, what are some of the other? Uh,
So agriculture in the state of Florida is the second largest economic driver for our state. And again, most people wouldn't know that. You think of Disney, you think of our beaches, you think of citrus,
right.
but you don't think about agriculture. We've got 2 million people that work inside of agriculture in Florida. It is literally a $137 billion industry in the state of Florida. So we are the specialty crop capital of the country.
Mm,
So we grow everything. I mean, from timber. Timber is actually the number one commodity in the state of Florida.
really?
So it's all over the panhandle. We're number two in the nation when it comes to our ranches for cows. So we only second to Texas. We have
Wow.
Yep. We also talking about Kamala Harris earlier, that we are the only state in the continental United States that grows coconuts. So we have coconut trees in Florida. We've got sugar cane. We've got sweet corn. We've got cotton. I mean, we've got green beans. We've got tomatoes, strawberries, blueberries. I mean, we really have
Wow.
it all here. And now we've got hemp, which is the sixth largest now as our ag commodities go.
Is it really?
Yep.
Interesting. And revenue wise, yeah, any approximate figures on what that's bringing into the state?
Yeah, like I said, it's a $137 billion industry. So that is
Okay.
that is the
Yeah,
money
I
coming.
guess you did
Yeah, into the
address that.
state of
Yeah.
Florida. Like I said, it is the second largest economic driver for the state. I mean, we've got 46,000 working farms and ranches, everything from small to the big guys. It's all over the map, and it's actually when I was elected, people were kept saying, what is a good Jewish girl from Miami who's a lawyer lobbyist in the cannabis space doing running for commissioner of agriculture?
Right.
And so the answer was, first of all, it is a large department. It is Commissioner of Agriculture and Consumer Services. So I got to use my attorney advocacy arm for
Mm,
the consumer side of things that typically got
cool.
left behind in the job. But being from the cannabis space, it is an agricultural commodity. So
Yeah.
that was kind of, but I really did not have any real working knowledge of agriculture when I got elected. And it took me some time for the people inside of agriculture to understand that first and foremost, I am an advocate. And that is what you need here in the Department of Agriculture, somebody to be an advocate for agriculture. And so shortly, I was having drinks with the Farm Bureau presidents and getting invited to every association keynote speech, everywhere. And but it was one of the most fascinating jobs, and loved every single moment of it. I mean, being able to protect what is the fabric of the state of Florida, which is agriculture. I mean, it's on our license plates. The citrus oranges are on our license plates. It's the
Yeah.
bedrock of our state.
Well, like you said, that you didn't have any real ag experience or knowledge. Look, politics is full of people who have a wealth of knowledge about subjects, but they don't have any passion.
Hmm.
You know,
Yep.
it's the knowledge you can
Learn.
pick up.
Yep.
I've found passion is one of those things for the most part, you've either got it
Yep.
or you don't. You don't go out and learn passion, and so it's cool when somebody comes in with the passion and what you were pointing out to them. Look, the important thing here is I'm a huge advocate.
Yep.
That's what, for this to get off the ground, for this to go, for this to grow, there's got to be energy.
Yep.
I mean, obviously, people before me have had the knowledge, but they haven't gotten this off the ground. So maybe it's passion.
And the other thing is too is yes, passion, but it's also the willingness, as we were talking about before we got onto this, is also the willingness to change things and
Yeah.
to be able to walk into something, especially
Yes.
agriculture, which is still a very old boy network. They're still very dominated by white men. And to go first female ever elected to Commissioner of Agriculture, not just for the state of Florida, but the entire South. And so to walk in with fresh eyes, new perspective, to be looking at things from a different direction and coming up with solutions that may be different than my predecessors had because they're looking at it from a different perspective. And so
Right.
we really were able to come in and we put a list together. Like, for instance, like we knew, and still today, that people involved in agriculture is actually the number one suicide rates is in agriculture.
I did not know that.
Because if you think about it, most people inside of agriculture are a little bit further away from their neighbors,
Yes.
mostly living in communities that are smaller, have less access to the internet because of broadband, access to quality roads, to hospitals. And so there's a lot of seclusion and they're barely making ends meet. Yeah, the big guys out there are making hand over fist, and that's part of the reason why our food costs are so high because they're making a lot of money. But it's the mid to small, farms and ranches that they are just barely making ends meet. And so it is really, so anyhow, long story short, I came in, I was like, what do we do about this? And so we talked about a lot of doing like telemental health, being able to get in there. And then my team was like, wait a second, these guys don't have broadband. How are we getting
Uh,
the telehealth to them? So we were coming up with different ideas and strategies and working then with the Biden administration to get a lot of broadband into these communities and to form a mental health advocacy inside the Department of Agriculture. But again, it took a different type of leader to walk in and want to solve problems that maybe my predecessors either knew and didn't think through it, or it just wasn't on their radars.
yeah. I I'll make this assumption about you, and then you can tell me whether I'm right or wrong. But just because of some similarities we have that I do know about, I'm guessing you, like me, kind of sometimes thrive on the resistance, the pushback against your thing, right? Whereas I know a lot of people who go through life not speaking out or not introducing something new or new idea, new thought that cuts against grain because they have kind of thin skin, right? And the first time somebody criticizes them, they're deflated, right? That that's when my brain really functions at its best.
Yeah.
I need it. In fact, I need it. I can't do my best work unless I've got somebody saying, "Oh, yeah, that's dumb," or pushing against me. Are you kind of like that?
Yeah, and so much so, like one, if you're trying to make progress, if you're trying to do good, and everybody's agreeing with you, then you're doing something wrong. You
You're
know that
right, right.
if you're trying, because otherwise it would have been done before. And one of those examples, going back to the cannabis conversation, I'm also a gun owner. I have
As am I.
have a concealed weapons permit, and I have inherited a firearm from my grandfather. But I've always wanted to purchase a new firearm to be able to carry more frequently. And recognizing that as a cannabis user, that we are not allowed to purchase a firearm.
Yeah,
It is
yeah.
against the ATF, it is against the laws, and it's on the ATF form, I think it's question 10 Echo, that specifically states that. And so I walked in and into the commissioner's job, and I turned to my team and I said, we got to fix this. We're going to sue the federal government. And they're like, what? because because one of the things that is also underneath the Commissioner of Agriculture was the concealed weapons program for the state of Florida, one of the largest in the entire nation. And so we found a nexus on because of the advocacy I was doing on cannabis and the fact that I was, overseeing the gun purchasing. We worked for years. The goal was to have it filed in 2020, this lawsuit, but of course, the pandemic hit, and so priorities shifted.
Sure.
And we filed the lawsuit April 20th of 2022, and we filed a federal lawsuit on the discrimination of medical cannabis users being able to purchase a firearm. And at the time, April 2022, the administration is Democrat. And so,
Right.
so here you have the only statewide elected Democrat who was running for governor of the state of Florida filing a lawsuit against the Biden administration. And
Right.
so the conversations, of course, in house were like, you are going to get slammed. I mean, granted, we called the Department of Justice first. We talked to Merrick Garland's office. We told the White House we were doing this, that this is obviously a policy that was put in place way before they got there. And to make sure that they knew that this was going on. But fellow Democrats lit me up
Oh, I bet.
about, suing the Democratic president of the United States. And I kind of was like, but it's the right thing to do. And,
Yes.
and I will take whatever is coming at me because we have to make progress on this issue. And this
Right.
is one of those things that is just needs to happen. And that case is still going on. It's in the 11th Circuit here in the South in Florida. But it's also, interesting enough, was the same exact issue that Hunter Biden was convicted on.
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
everything kind of has,
Oh, yeah.
a way of making progress, but
Certainly.
yeah.
Yeah, and that's again, like it's in the beginning. That's the kind of thing I like about you, because you said something, and that, to me, that's really the only thing that matters. You said, but it was the right thing.
Yep.
That for the most of the time, that should push everything else out to the periphery. If it's the right thing to do, then it's the right thing to do.
That's right. No matter the consequences personally, no matter the consequences politically, and no matter who you're having to challenge.
Right.
And again, at that time, everybody just saw it as, Nikki Fried suing Joe Biden. And I had, but it was hard, but it was even, because I was elected with a lot of support from the Parkland families and from some of the families that have been involved with gun sense regulations and victim families, and had to have a separate conversation with them all and say, listen, this is actually providing more safety for, people are having to get the background checks when they purchase a firearm. And if you're going into using cannabis, that you're doing it safely and going through the regulated market, which means that we need both of those to be able to coexist. But it had to have those conversations to work through it, because again, it's the right thing to have done. It provides safety on both sides of that conversation. And again, what is the difference between somebody having alcohol and somebody, smoking weed when it comes to gun ownership? Going back to my PD days, there is never a time in my entire 4 years as being a public defender did my client come in and say, Miss Fried, I was just too high when I shot up the liquor store. Like,
Right.
I was too high on crack or meth or
Yeah.
alcohol, but never weed. And so
Right.
it really is just kind of getting a cultural change that has to happen.
Yeah. In those in that last hour, 30 minutes before I go to bed, after I've taken a gummy, I don't find myself sitting around looking at my wife and saying, hey, you know what? I feel like going robbing someplace. That's just not how they go.
That's
It's, you know. So let's talk about Ron DeSantis for a moment, because one thing I know is, again, and really, I think that's really where you really jumped onto my radar, right? Because you were not afraid of Ron DeSantis. You criticized Ron DeSantis,
daily.
like few other people were willing to. And I while I didn't say his name earlier when I'd mentioned that, we've got outspoken Republicans, but they aren't necessarily behind something that's good for everyone, as opposed to the examples I gave with you. Look, Ron DeSantis is outspoken, but he's also a hateful man.
Yep.
Right? He makes no bones about if you don't fit into this category, I don't care about you. In fact, I will work against you.
Yep.
What do you think his political future is, and how does your political future, where does it fit in with what his might be?
My hope is that he has no political future. This is not a good person. I spent 4 years on the cabinet with him. At the cabinet, we took a trade mission to Israel. So we have spent a lot of time together. And I always talk about the fact that, for those 4 years, twice did he make eye contact with me. Twice. That tells you that underneath it all, that there's nothing there. And
Right.
when you make eye contact, and eye contact is so important to human interaction.
You
To
bet it
look
is.
into somebody's soul, to see that they're interacting with you, that they're listening to the conversation, they're not distracted by whatever else is around them. But when you do look, that there's nothing behind those eyes. And I had told everybody, whether it's during debates or when he's on TV, turn off the volume and just watch his facial expressions, watch how he doesn't, his eyes, like it just, you could tell that he's just mean-spirited and there's not a heart behind him. And so I hope that, and then he's weird. I mean, he is just like, don't ever try eating with him. He stuffs his mouth, whether that's a distraction to not have to interact with people, but he's just weird, socially awkward.
That's awkward fits him too. Every time I watch that man, it's like, my God, he looks so uncomfortable in his own skin.
Yeah. So I think what happened along the way, first of all, like he's always been that way. And I think that when he ran for governor and won, that the Heritage Foundation, which we know is what's controlling Project 2025 and a lot of the Republican stuff that's happening today, got a hold of him and said, we're going to make you president. Just follow this playbook. And for 6 years, that's exactly what he did. He followed this playbook from, the Don't Say Gay bill to removing of state attorneys from office to a 6-week abortion ban, going after immigrants, the lawsuits with Disney and the cruise ship industry and everything in between that he has done, book banning, going after higher education. And so he didn't do it because that was what was in the best interest of the people of the state. I mean, trying to take our state parks and put them into pickleball courts. I mean, just crazy stuff. And so I'm hoping that the American people saw his awkwardness, saw that his policies weren't in the best interest of the people of the state. We have property insurance in Florida is crippling our state. We are the #1 property insurance in the entire country. And yes, we've got hit by hurricanes, but there's ways to moderate this. But they've given blank checks in the insurance industry. There's been a 400% increase of premiums since he became governor. And we are the #1 inflation in the country because he refused to bring down some of the Biden dollars for infrastructure, for the IRA, for the Inflation Reduction Act. And I mean, even now we're fighting on kids care, which was approved which is a Medicare expansion program, which he's refusing to bring down the money for our kids to feed our kids. I mean, he's just not a good person.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping that the American people saw enough of him during the presidential run that it's over,
Right.
it's over. I mean, I know that in his heart, whatever is there, that he wants that he wants to be president of the United States, and is certainly going to try to position himself. He is term limited out in 26, and so my hope is that he fades into the darkness, goes on to he can have a Fox News show, he can write some books, he can be whatever else his career is, but hopefully it's not in politics. And so I don't know how that interacts necessarily with mine. Per se, but he has done some significant destruction to the state, changing the name of the game when it comes to even voter registration, citizens initiatives. This year, we had both cannabis legalization, Amendment 3, and abortion access, Amendment 4, on the ballot. He not only used the full weight of him, but he also used the full weight of his office. We had
Yeah.
6 government agencies that basically put out false information using government dollars to go after these amendments, and spent roughly $50 million of taxpayer dollars to go after constitutional amendments. So, he needs to be done.
Yeah. I guess if there were any two things I can think of that I would say to Governor DeSantis. One, I hope he has already found a pair of cowboy boots that fit. And two, when you are going to do some press, some campaign photos of you doing physical labor, tucking your pants into your white boots, don't ditch the sweater. Ditch the
That's right.
sweater. They don't go together, right? It
Don't go together.
makes it look like the prop that it is. So
Jack, that my last day in office, I had for a couple of days we had been setting up like videos of just all the things that we had done, because it's very easy for the Republicans just attacked me for all the time that I was commissioner, and then when I ran for governor, to lose the accomplishments that we had inside the department to the political noise. And so we really wanted to make sure that we set the record straight on all of the amazing things that we did in those 4 years. I mean, most movement on energy efficiency, of helping the citrus industry, to helping agriculture, new commodities. I mean, we just really did a tremendous amount of work in my department and the team members. But the other last 15 minutes of my whole speeches was directed to Ron. And it was an outgoing statement that basically said, all right, you just pulled off 19-point win. And my primary opponent, Charlie Crist, it was a disaster for Democrats in 2022. And 19-point loss. We are now in a super minority in both the House and the Senate. And first time since Reconstruction that we did not have a statewide Democrat in the state of Florida. And so I said to Ron, what are you going to do with this? Are you going to recognize that you have an opportunity to govern for all 22 million people? Or are you going to take your ambitions and you're going to only govern for the 4.5 million Floridians that voted for you, and leaving the other 15 million apart to seek higher office? And I said, history is going to judge you by the decisions that you are going to make in the next 6 months.
right.
And I was right. He did not follow my lead, because if he had come in, imagine this. If Ron DeSantis had come in 2023, and had an agenda that brought people together, that lifted people up, that truly showed what a conservative Republican used to be, he might be president right now. But
Yes.
instead, he did more dividing and conquering, and divisive politics, and went to such an extreme direction that he's never going to be elected president of the United States.
No, no.
Um, but it is what it is.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I don't know whether this will be popular or not. Probably not, but then again, I don't care. Um, if Donald Trump would come into office, which we know he's not going to, but if he would come into office taking basically the same thing you laid out for DeSantis, because I love this country so much, and because I want to see everyone prosper, and I don't just mean financially, with their health, in all areas of life, as anti-Trump as I am, I would love to see him succeed in
Yep.
governing for everyone,
That's right.
right? And I would acknowledge him when he did. But much like DeSantis, it's not in him.
It's not in him, and not only is it not in him, but it's who he's also circling around him.
Yes.
At least in the first administration, there was good people, there was smart people,
Right.
qualified people who could be those guardrails that says that's not really how, like, let's not go there. But unfortunately, you're seeing what he's unleashing onto the country already. The
Yeah.
picks are very intentional picks, and they're outside the box. Which, again, talking to you and I, outside the box is good. Like, that's okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes politics have to be breaking things down. You gotta that's okay.
Yeah.
But to have unqualified people that are going to make a mockery of the United States, that can put us in not only national security issues, are standing on the world stage, the economics of this country, an oligarchy. I mean, the fact that Elon Musk hasn't left his side. This is somebody who, I don't even know if he's a U.S. citizen. If he was even able to
Sure.
vote in our elections, and got to this country illegally, um,
Right.
is the ones who are running the show, and it is not for the best interests of the people of this country. But yeah, I would welcome that. I would welcome any Republican who says, look, I may have campaigned on these things and I won on these things, but the reality is I'm now president for all Americans.
Yeah.
And to take those steps to create policies. We've got 4.2 million people in the state of Florida that are on the ACA Obamacare. If they dismantle the ACA, those are real lives and real people who are going to be in a real financial situation where they may not have access to health care, and they could be going through chemo, they could be on a wait list, for a liver transplant. I mean, all of these things that people are going through. So it is a shame, but yeah, I would absolutely welcome that if Donald Trump had that in him to do. But it's and the other thing, I'll say this, and I'll probably be slammed for this, that if they were to actually do that, it will be a long time before Democrats come back into power.
Oh, it would. There's no question about it. Yeah.
Yep.
It really would. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you are Jewish, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I especially with Israel and Gaza, especially on X, shortly after October 7th, I with unreservedly show support for Israel, and more widespread, the Jewish people as a whole, right? My thing has been, for most of my adult life, the Jewish people have had their ass kicked enough. That's my take. My grandfather fought in World War II, and when I don't know if I was even old enough to read yet when he was showing me pictures and talking to me about the Holocaust. And so I only ask you that as kind of a lead-in to this question, because I can only imagine that someone of Jewish faith, or someone who's Jewish, when they hear this talk about detention centers, that going back in your case to your parents' generation and the generation before, that has to resonate with you in a way that
Yep,
it can't for me.
that's right.
Am I correct?
You're 100% correct, and especially somebody like me who, when I was growing up, as I just saw, I've got Tikkun Olam tattooed on my wrist, and yes, that is anti-Jewish in the grand scheme of things. We're not supposed to put tattoos on our body, but I think God will forgive me for this one. But I've also spent a lot of my time growing up in Miami, going to Jewish school. I went to a Jewish day school, was very involved in my international youth organization, went to what's called the March of the Living, which is 1 week in Poland, 1 week in Israel, my junior year of high school. Actually walked through the gates of Auschwitz and Birkenau and Majdanek, and to know and to hear the history of how that came to be, that it wasn't just all of a sudden there's concentration camps and all of a
Right.
sudden, and it wasn't just 6 million Jews. And I think that the people of this country in the world need to remember that it was 6 million Jews, but it was 6 million others too. It was those that
That's
were
a good
not
point.
in society. There was politicians, there was gypsies, there was those that had disabilities. There was all types of other people that were also killed during the Holocaust. But to know that it didn't happen overnight, that Hitler was democratically elected. The
Right.
Nazi Party was the power that was elected. And then watching everything from history of, first was the consolidation of the power underneath under Hitler. Then it was banning of books. Then it was arresting of political operatives. Then it was, the military became part of the actual operations of the government. And then it came the putting the Jewish community in ghettos, and then it was rounding them up. And to be watching some of this rhetoric and some of the consolidation. Everybody always says, how can that have happened? And if you go to Poland or to Germany or where any of these concentration camps were, and you see how close their neighbors were, that the ashes that came out of the crematoriums were landing on people's homes and house and in their cars. They knew what was going on and they kept
Right.
silent. So you're seeing some behavioral similarities between what was during the, I mean, we're not talking thousands of years ago. We still
No.
have Holocaust survivors today. I mean, granted, they're dying off and they're far and few between at this point, but and so to know the rhetoric that is coming from the extremes on the right, is dangerous. And yes, and that is one of why I fight the way I fight. To
Yeah.
know that it is still possible that even in our democratic society, watching how easy people can be manipulated, and especially because trusted news sources are no longer there. People are going in and are kind of going tribal again and going kind of inside, only talking to the people that are in their inner circles. And
Yes.
that is dangerous. That is
It's very
dangerous.
dangerous. It's very dangerous. I've been leaning more heavily into that, both on social media, and I have a newsletter called the Jack Hopkins Now newsletter, which is about uh, building resilience and dealing with and managing your fears. And I've in my social media posts, one thing I've been doing that's been getting ruffling some feathers, but that's okay because for the people whose feathers it's not ruffling, who are actually going, interesting. I think it's being helpful. I'm calling people out on this. I'm saying, hey, look, this is not a game.
Hmm.
This is not a joke. This is not a paragraph in the newspaper. This is happening right now, and we know exactly how it will unfold if we do what I see already happening. And you are right. People are the very thing people have long said, how could that happen? How could they do that? I'm watching people do the thing they could never understand.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's the same thing that I, I'm looking at it from, when DeSantis's name has been floated for Secretary of Defense. And that is terrifying. terrifying because one, he created a militia inside of the state of Florida that he's now used against the people of the state. Again, we talked about $50 million that was used to suppress voters. This is somebody who would not think twice if Donald Trump calls him up and says, again, enemies within, that's using, it's Secretary of Defense, you're defending the country. And if their mind is made up that Democrats are the enemies within, we are on a very dangerous, slippery slope. And if you've got somebody who is so as diabolical as Ron DeSantis, to use the military against operatives inside of the Democratic Party, and people say, "Oh my God, Nikki, how can you say that?" Again, that this is never going to happen. I'd like to not take that chance.
Right. Yeah, and case in point, for about the last year and a half leading up to the election, in a way that always offered a solution or a direction to go, I was hammering the point home that it's going to get bad in the lead up to this election. If you think it's bad now, just wait. And of course, it did get worse and worse and worse. So initially, a year and a half ago when I was saying that, I know there were a lot of people rolling their, oh, here you go. What's he selling? Trying to introduce fear to us. Well, I've had a lot of those people message me and say, you know what, a year and a half ago, I thought you'd maybe gone off the rails a little bit, but pretty much what you said was going to happen, happened. And that's when I remind them, I'm telling you the same thing again. Now, after he comes into office, the things that sound too nutty to actually be real, they are real.
Yeah, and again, I hope that better angels, are going to prevail here, and that he gets there. And for him, this was about an ego. This was about getting rid of this was about ego. This was about, hey, I won in 2020 and I'm going to prove everybody again and be able to kind of go out of this chapter on a high. This is to get rid of all those lawsuits and criminal prosecution. This is to help financially. I mean, he's selling perfume. The president-elect of the United States is selling perfume.
It is
beyond.
right.
And so I hope that he gets there and he says, mission accomplished, I'm here. And doesn't actually pursue some of these things that has been discussed, or allowing these people that have really dark visions of the world to be able to truly take over. Again, I do think, and it's part of my job as chair of the Democratic Party, is to not every single day be yelling and screaming. That will drive everybody crazy. That doesn't get us any good footing. That doesn't change the narrative. Yeah. But it's making sure, look, I would be, if Donald Trump does something good that benefits the people of this country, I'm going to be the first one and mark this. It's at time that we're on my birthday on 2024 before he gets in. I will be happy to say that was a good move. You come in and look, not a single person in this country believes that government is efficient, that there isn't, bureaucratic waste and bureaucratic misspending. Not a single person in this country. So I am all in favor of cutting red tape, of getting rid of unnecessary spending, getting our deficit down. The question is, how does that get done? At what cost? Do some of it, sure, absolutely, but you can't cut Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. You can't do things like that. Figure out other ways. And so we will be very watchdog-like, looking to see that, yes, praising things that get done, but also in the same respect, making sure that when they've gone too far, okay, sure, you want to go review the COVID vaccines, fine, but don't go back and look at polio. Don't go back and look at mumps and measles and some of these other, vaccines that have truly saved this country from tremendous healthcare outbreaks. So I think that as long as there's moderation in how his policies get implemented, the country's going to be okay, and we'll get through it. But if he takes the extreme and surrounds himself by those type of extremists, hold on tight.
I've got a question for you that maybe you have an answer for. That me, as somebody not directly involved in politics, I can't get my thumb on it. Usually in politics, or a lot of time anyway, I should say, if somebody's really driving something hard, uh, you think, okay, who are the people lobbying right behind for this? Who's the, for example, like the pharmaceutical companies? If there's a big push for something, you go, okay, well, it's Pfizer or whoever. They're pushing. The thing with RFK Jr.
Hmm.
that's kind of baffling to me, it would seem that most of what he's promoting and his ideology about this whole thing would be counterproductive for the pharmaceutical industry, that maybe they would be losing money. So my question then would be, who's throwing more money at this than the pharmaceutical companies to go the other way?
I think that I do think the pharmaceutical companies have the most to lose here, and I'm down for that. I mean, I think as a
Yeah,
nation, we all are down for that.
sure.
um, so I don't know if, in fact, RFK is kind of just a drifter, and just kind of like goes through. I think in some ways, I think he believes some of this stuff. Like I
Yeah,
think
I think so. Yeah,
I think that he's a believer, and again, we go back to this passion thing. I guess having passion for something you believe in
right,
it doesn't mean I'm making you Secretary of Health, but
right.
I think that some of this stuff, and which is why I think ultimately at the end of the day, a lot of the things that RFK wants to do isn't going to happen. Do I think that, like, when it comes to the FDA, yeah, the FDA has a lot of problems. And going back to their cannabis space, they don't know how to regulate cannabis. I will never forget in 2019 when I went up to Washington, D.C., and I was working on legalization of hemp for Florida, and I was talking to the USDA and to the FDA. And I walked into the FDA. They obviously had not done their research, and they spent the first few minutes of our meeting talking to me about cannabis and giving me the history of cannabis. And so I had to stop them and say, let me reintroduce myself. But I said to them, look, these states across the country after the Farm Bill of 2018 are legalizing hemp and are utilizing new products that are coming out for human and animal consumption, and we're going to need direction. And they gave me all of these like long hoops and, well, what about this and what about that? And I said, you know what, guys? I'm going to do it in Florida, and you're just going to follow my lead because you sound like you're 10 years away from having any type of ability to put out, directives to any of us. And we did, and they still are not there. And this is now 6 years later. So there are real significant problems when it comes to these government agencies. Do I think RFK is the right one to have a solution? No, he's going to blow shit up.
Yeah, yeah. And I like your answer because it mirrors it to a degree. What I was thinking is like, look, I think as crazy as it may sound in this era that we're in, because everybody thinks everything that happens is just because of money, right? But when I look at RFK Jr., I think, this guy was born into money. He's always had money. I don't know that money's a big motivator for him at this point in life. I think he believes these things. And so it's not necessarily somebody throwing money at him to get him to go. This is just what he believes, and this is what he wants to do.
Yeah.
So as we start to close out here, because again, it is your birthday, and I'm sure you've got other things you would like to do that will be fun. Uh, how can people listening to this or watching this podcast, how can they support you and the direction that you are going, whether they live in Florida or not?
Yeah. First of all, follow me on my social platforms. I'm on everything from Blue Sky now I'm staying on X, so I'm definitely encouraging
As
people
am I.
to stay on X. We can't concede an entire space. And there's a lot of other new platforms, ones that are minority owned. Everybody get on there and be on there. So that's one. Follow us. Also follow what we're doing here in Florida when it comes to Democrats. Don't give up on us. Please don't give up on us. There's 22 plus million people here in the state of Florida that need balance back in government, that need people to have leadership that is going to protect everybody in the state. And I always say this to you. Born and raised here in Miami and Florida, and so were my parents. This state used to be so libertarian. If you
Yeah.
wanted to go down to Key West and you want to hang out on Duval Street, have at it. You want to go to Tampa, has Gasparilla, which is like Mardi Gras, throw bees. You want to go to the 30A, which is the Panhandle, Redneck Riviera area. You
Yeah.
know, people just left you alone. You found your community, you found your places, and people left you alone. What Ron DeSantis has done to this state in 6 years is tried to force everybody to be in his image. And so we've got to get back to balance here in our state. So really encouraging, first of all, everybody, don't give up on Florida. There's a lot of really, really good people here that are fighting back every single day. Two, always we'll put a plug in, go to floridadems.org, even if it's $2, $3, $5, whatever you can afford, be a monthly subscriber to us. We are doing the really hard work, but most importantly, just don't give up on us. We're going to fight back. We've been 30 years in the desert wandering. In 30 years, there's only been 3 Democrats elected statewide, myself included. And my goal in life is to make sure, not in life, but my goal is to make sure that I'm not the last statewide elected Democrat. And we'll get back there, but it's going to take some time and patience and people not giving up on us.
Well, I want to say that on behalf of at least my followers, right? And I've got a couple of 100,000 followers. I say for them, thank you for being you, right? We like you and who you are and how you operate, and we need more people like you. Uh, Second, hey, thanks for taking some time out for me on your birthday. I mean, that means a lot. That you didn't have to do that, and I'm sure you get plenty of calls. So, thank you. Um, will we see you run for governor again?
I love my state. If you can't hear that, I love every aspect of my state. There will be a time where I will run again statewide. We've got work to do first, and so I am rerunning for chair of the Florida Democratic Party to continue rebuilding. But I'm a policy wonk at heart. And have lots of ideas of how to make the state better and to create balance back. So don't count me out for not running for governor one time again. But certainly we've got work to do to get us back into a better position.
And that's so cool about you. You're not chasing the title. You've got stuff you actually want to get done, and you'll do it wherever you can most adequately get it done.
Yep.
That's awesome. All right, thank you. Listen, happy birthday. Go have a
Well,
drink or something and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank
I
you, Nikki.
appreciate it. Thanks, Jack, and thanks to all of your listeners. Take care.